hear more about the economic development plan in Shaka Bottom and the Boulevard, and to give your feedback. We have changed the format a little based on what we heard from prior sessions so that you can get more in-depth information in terms of the major components of the economic development plan, as well as an opportunity to give us feedback in a different format. So with that, I'm going to punt to Ms. Tammy Jackson, who will facilitate us this evening, and you will introduce the rest of the lineup, including our speakers and city staff who are with us, Mr. Marshall, Ms. Hall, Mr. Hickson. Am I supposed to go? You don't have to. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Tammy Jackson. I am the independent facilitator for this evening's meeting. Hopefully this evening you have picked up, as Councilwoman Newbill said, a copy of the agenda from the table out in the hall. Just by way of a couple more logistics, the restrooms, if you are not familiar, restrooms are located across the hall in the main office, both men's and women's restrooms for our use this evening. We will take the opportunity to hear from you in several different ways this evening at the meeting. Before the presentation on the Revitalize RVA plan, you will have a chance to participate via audience polling and participation via clicker to answer some questions to gauge, first of all, some of the demographic information, sort of who's here, and some initial opinions regarding the Revitalize RVA plan. After that, Mr. David Hicks will come and make a presentation sharing some of the features and some very pertinent information about the plan. And then after that, we will have 4 breakout stations available for you to, within a 40-minute time frame, visit these individual stations or these different stations. There's also some out in the hall, and I'll give you more specific instructions at that time. But to have questions answered, to hear from experts who have a great deal of information on the different features of the plan. After that, we're going to ask that you please stick around, have another cup of tea, some more food, and come back in. And we'd like to do one final round after the engagement session of audience polling to determine if there have been any changes in your opinions after having the opportunity for this information. Right after that, Councilwoman Newbill said if there are any burning questions at that point, she would work with you to get those answered. So, before we jump into the meat of tonight, on the reverse side of your agenda, we have a very brief set of terms of engagement, more or less how we hope to work together this evening. And one of the reasons, we deal with these terms of engagement, we think that terms of engagement are so important, is because you're here tonight because you care and because you're a stakeholder in the future of the city of Richmond. And because we're stakeholders, we all have different thoughts and ideas and opinions about how things should be. But as we work together this evening, we've identified these 5 things that we hope will make for the opportunity for information sharing, for learning, as well as for feedback. So if you would just follow along, I'd like to just very briefly go through these. Please silence the ringer devices on your phones to minimize interruptions. If you could turn the ringers off, it would be very much appreciated. This meeting is about information sharing, interaction, and feedback. There will be no final decisions made regarding the Revitalize RVA plan at this meeting. Please share responsibility for ensuring the success of the process and the quality of the discussion. With that in mind, please separate the people from the issues we seek to address. Avoid characterizing the motives of others. Acknowledge and try to understand others' perspectives. Please avoid any name-calling and otherwise disrespectful behavior. Please stay focused on the task at hand and share airtime with others. Ensure that every participant has the opportunity to ask questions. And then finally, be a good listener. Listening does not require agreement. As we move through the evening, if we need to revisit these. These will be the groundwork for our engagement this evening. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to David Hicks to share the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Thank you, Tammy, for leading us through that exercise. One of the things I want to start with, first of all, good evening. My name is David Hicks. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor for the Mayor, Dwight C. Jones, here in Richmond. My prior life, I was Commonwealth Attorney here in the city for 12 years. One of the things I want to talk about, and we talk about the overall concept of this, is obviously this is a plan that the Mayor first announced back on the 11th of November. So it's been a couple of months. You know, folks have been out here. We've been having the opportunity and the privilege, frankly, of engaging the community. And during that, obviously, we've gotten to see and hear different voices and see different people. And one of the things I want to jump ahead on, noticing the answers. From the answers, it appears like we've got about 22 to 25 folks that are responding. We clearly have more folks than that here. Some of the other people are from the city and we don't vote. One of the things in the questions, and I want to jump to it and then back out, is first of all, it seems like only a couple of people have not heard this concept or been to a presentation before, and that's good, because that means folks are still seeking information, but it's not brand new. So we get to have, you know, a little bit more frank, get down a little bit into the weeds of that conversation, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to jump ahead and then come back on one of the things based upon the information that you gave. It seems that one of the larger concerns is traffic. So let's jump to that first and then back out, okay? Jump to that first, and the stadium proposed, which you see here, you'll see other pictures. The size of this stadium is about 7,000 or so, 7,200 fixed seats. The average attendance of the Flying Squirrels in this past season has been about 6,500 people per game, 6,500 people per game. So one of the things I want to do is I want to put that in perspective, because it sounds like a lot of people coming and going, and we want to put that in perspective. On Broad Street, and obviously this is proposed to be on Chaco on Broad Street around 18th Street. Has anybody been to a VCU basketball home game in the Siegel Center? Anybody? Raise your hand, been to a VCU game. All right. Everybody know where the Siegel Center is? Further up Main Street on the other side of Belvedere. I went to a game a couple of weeks ago, and at that game they announced that it was their 40th, and I think they've been continuing. This game was their 40th consecutive sellout. 40th consecutive sellout. Do you know how many people fill up the Siegel Center? 7,000. So, if you've ever been to a Siegel Center game, up Broad Street, from where we're talking, they put 7,000 people in the stadium to watch the game. They stay there for 2-3 hours, and then they leave. And they do that every home game. So as far as traffic and the concerns, it's not new. We do that already. We already do that downtown. And frankly, we do that at a place, the Siegel Center, that's farther away from parking lots, farther away from the interstate highway. One of the things, whenever we talk about doing something new, there is that natural, I don't know if it'll work concern. One of the things we will always suggest is very few of these things are brand new. Most of them have something that we're already doing or something that we studied that someone's done before that we can compare it to, but that's why we welcome the questions. So when you hear questions about traffic, one of the things the response would be, we're already doing it. One of the things that you will hear over and over again, especially when you talk about this area and the people that come down there, will the people come? Can they come? And the answer, interestingly enough, unlike, frankly, it was back in the 90s, the answer now is they already are. We can give you the data as far as the number of festivals that come down to the bottom, the number of all these type of things, thousands of people visit the bottom, and leave. When we talk about traffic, one of the things we're going to talk about is this. Right today, when we go through it, where the parking garages are, that are state parking garages that fill up every day with state workers, and every day, not saying nothing bad about my fellow government workers, but every day, a little bit after 5 o'clock, they all leave. And they don't leave far after 5 o'clock. And they all leave, and they empty those garages out, and they get back on the highway, and they go to where they're going. So, since traffic was the issue that you brought up, I wanted to jump ahead a little bit, address it. And I want everyone to take a breath and you're right. We already do that in the city of Richmond. So, all right, one of the things that this plan is, and one of the things that we've said over and over again, the mayor's been saying over and over again, what is this plan not? A lot of discussion went on before the plan came out, newspaper polls, all this sort of stuff, and nobody asked the question that we are talking about now. All of those questions were about baseball, and only baseball. This plan is about economic development that happens to include baseball. And that's another important distinction. Okay. And again, one other thing, because sometimes when we're in city government, we do this over and over again, and we assume people know stuff that we live with every day, and we have to take a minute and back up. One of the things when you talk about paying for things with government gets its money mostly from one place. Different types of taxes and fees and revenues. So when we talk about government revenue, we're generally talking about taxes. Not all, but significantly. In the city of Richmond, the principal place where the tax revenue comes from are property taxes. That's where the money comes from. We also get other kind of tax, business license tax, all those kind of things and fees. The lion's share is property tax. One of the problems that we have in the city is this. First of all, we've got a lot of government property, state property, and those things. Very similar to Washington, D.C. Government property doesn't pay taxes. It's pretty to have, it's nice to see, but as far as paying taxes, not so much. One of the other things that we have in Richmond, which is a challenge, which we're here about too, because that's the key proponent of this, or objective of this, is in the city of Richmond, we have a very high poverty rate. All right? We have a 26% poverty rate in the city of Richmond. 1 out of every 4 people in the city of Richmond lives at or below the poverty line. So you have a lot of government buildings and a lot of people who live below the poverty line that are probably paying property taxes through rent or other places. So therefore, you have a smaller pie than other places that have a lot of residential that are paying property, and bluntly, a lot of more middle-class people and rich people that help the tax burden. So part of the strategy is how do you deal given those challenges? This particular area that we're going to discuss, the Shaco part of it, one of the challenges I also want you to think about in how this plan was developed is this particular area has not been economically developed despite the fact that almost everything around it, especially in recent years, has been being developed. If you walk through Shaco, and especially if you're from around here, I saw the stat, we have a younger crowd here tonight, but if you walked around Shaco and you've known around Shaco for the last 10, 20 years, one of the things that you'll see is almost every warehouse that can be converted has already been converted. Every place that can be built upon, for the most part, has already been done. Interestingly enough, this particular area still remains, and the question should be, why? And the answer is very simple. It is in a floodplain. It floods. And when something is in a floodplain, there are very special rules that apply to it, as opposed to what you can build and whether you would build. And then for the people who are developers, whether somebody's going to lend you the money to build it there, so whether or not you can make a business decision. So those are sort of the things that everyone that was involved with the plan we're working with, that sometime when we come out to the public, we forget that, frankly, most citizens don't know about that, nor would they know about that, nor are they interested in knowing about that, because frankly, that's what you pay us to figure out, working for the government. So, those sort of backdrops being said, I want to walk through what this plan proposes and what this plan does. All right? First thing, let's start with the current view of the Shaco site. One of the things I indicated, and Tammy, if you could hit with the pointer. All right, there's Franklin Street, okay? Down a little bit. All right, Franklin, thank you. There's the train shed, just to get your perspective. All right, there's 17th Street and Broad Street. All right, that lot across Broad Street. As you can see, in all of this area, all of this is floodplain. And right now, almost all of this area is undeveloped. And that's primarily the reason. Okay? Here's another current view. Just so happens in this particular picture, it does demonstrate and show some standing water there. You know, that's not intentional, that's just the picture that was taken. Next slide. This is the conceptual view of what it is that we're trying to do in this exact same area. As you can see where the ballpark did, first let's go to the train shed so you can get your reference point. And let's come down Franklin Street. Okay. Right here where you see the promenade, the squiggly lines, come back a little bit towards Main Street. All right. This is where the current farmer's market is. What the plan does is it takes out the farmer's market, it puts in this, it has the waterworks, it has that sort of squiggly representation there, which represents and commemorates the old Gillies Creek, which goes through that area. And it opens up that area for a plaza. The restaurants that would be there would then be able to utilize that space. The space would also be able to be utilized for festivals, farmers market, multi-use. One of the reasons for the concept is the creation of a place. One of the things that we have in the city, a lot of things we don't have in the city, a whole bunch of land is one of that. But one of the things we do have in core cities, which Richmond is you have centerness. And the creation of public places are one of the things that make cities more attractive than suburbs to many people. All right, going up the plaza, it then empties into what we are proposing for the stadium. The stadium, and people indicate when they talk about the stadium, they know what we have on the boulevard, the diamond. It reaches out of the sky, it's huge, you can see it from the highway. This, the concourse around the stadium, that's all on level with Broad Street. The stadium is actually down in the ground. Part of the design of this is to mitigate, not fix, mitigate the flood issues. The solution to completely fix the flood issue is estimated to be a $200+ million fix. Basically, if you just wanted to fix the flood, you would have to say, there are 5 schools that I'll never build because I need to build a pipe in the ground to take water away. Probably not a business proposition that anyone's ever going to do. Now, let me jump ahead also. The stadium would be publicly owned through the city or through an arm of the city, the Economic Development Association, which is important. The buildings around the stadium, and if you will point to that building, north of Broad, I'm sorry, Tammy, the north of Broad first, this one over here by the train shed, which would be an apartment building, and then the other one, another apartment building. This is the financing in a nutshell. You take land that has value with nothing on it. Nothing can be built on it because, in this instance, it's in a floodplain. You address the flooding issue in a way that allows you to build these other things around it. Let's say that your piece of land is worth $1,000 and you're paying the property tax on $1,000. right? And let's say now you get to build $50 million worth of building on top of it because of the improvements. The new taxes from the $50 million that we didn't have and weren't going to get and now get, that's what we use to pay for the stadium and the improvement. You take money that you would not have otherwise had, you make an improvement that then allows you to have development, and then you take the development to pay for the improvement. That's called a form of tax incremental financing. That's how you pay for something that otherwise the private sector couldn't afford and the government by itself wouldn't have a need to. That's part of the business partnership of making the deal work. Okay? So, I'm sorry, back up, Tim. Now, I want to also address your attention to the west of Broad, to the Lumpkins jail site. The Lumpkins jail is a discovered site which is an old slave jail. One of the things that you had a lot of discussion about, which is good discussion to have, is this particular area. This particular area was one of the centers of the slave trade. This particular area in Richmond, interestingly enough, was probably the history that we're hearing and understanding, was the second largest slave market, second only to New Orleans. Very important history. It's estimated that as many as 50% of the African Americans currently in the United States of America can trace part of their heritage to Richmond, Virginia because of the slave trade. One of the components of this plan and one of the prices of this plan is the development of the heritage site on the Lumpkins jail site and in that area. And we'll show you pictures of the pavilion and other things and the development of that. That's some of the things we've been working on. As we speak right now, the former governor, McDonnell, has put $11 million into the current budget in order to facilitate this portion of the development. So we're serious about this. Okay, so what we are talking about as far as the slave commemoration site is an investment between $20 and $30 million for the first phase, of which, if we can get it through the General Assembly, we already have an $11 million commitment from the state and a commitment from the business community to raise the rest. So this is not a maybe it'll happen someday. One of the mayor's directives on this is the slavery heritage site has got to get developed and built at the same time as the rest of the economic development. Okay? Next slide. Sort of a comparison of the two slides. And again, let me jump ahead and then back up, because if I tell you this out of context, you may wonder what we're talking about. For those of you familiar where the current diamond is, it's on North Boulevard. The North Boulevard side, if you can picture it, right there, sort of at the intersection of Highway 95 and Highway 64. From all the experts and commercial real estate experts we have talked to, people who have developed huge sites, this particular intersection, because it's at the intersection of 64 and 95, is one of the potentially best retail locations in the Mid-Atlantic region, maybe in much of the East Coast. The economic potential of that area is really the square one of our analysis. One of the questions that you answered in your survey was, where do you shop? Where do you do your grocery shopping? Where do you do your retail shopping? One of the things we've been able to share with individuals and residents and citizens is this. As we sit today, north of the James River in the city of Richmond, we do not have a general retail store. We do not have a Target. We do not have a general retail store. You shop at Willow Lawn, you shop at Virginia Center Commons, you shop at White Oaks for one good reason, because that's where the stores are. And they're no longer in the city. And when we say, why does it matter? Because sometimes we don't explain this to you. It matters for one reason. When you buy something at a retail store, you pay taxes, you pay sales tax. A portion of that sales tax, localities get to use for the things that we use, for the building of schools, for the paying of police officers, for the paying of fire. That's what we use the revenue for. So when we do not have retail and we are going to somebody else's house to spend our money, we are financing the things that they want for their house at the expense of the things we need for our own. It's not a lack of cooperation. It is an indication of reality. So as we talk about needing to address not just retail, because wouldn't it be nice for us to be able to stay at home and buy stuff, but retail because isn't it necessary that when we spend our dollars, they work for our community? That's the basics of the business. So the Boulevard site as the beginning point is how do we, in a city with 26% poverty, the need for jobs, and the need to expand the tax revenue, how do we not fully utilize the most prime strategic piece of real estate that we have? That's the beginning. Now, how do we do that without hurting baseball? Because the Squirrels especially are a great community partner and a great amenity. You want to live places that have nice stuff. The Squirrels are big, they bring excitement. They're a great partner. So when you do the problem, how do we fix our issue without hurting our partner? That's where this plan comes from. Then you get the added benefit of then addressing and bringing the resources to address the heritage piece, which heretofore, bluntly, has had a hard time generating the resources to give it the proper commemoration that it requires. Those are the moving parts. Now, when you go through these comparisons, if you do the Boulevard site, as far as the new historic commemoration, obviously there's none. Shaco is where the history is, Shaco is where the action is, Shaco is where the learning experience can happen. Potential, you can have a new grocery store on the Boulevard. The number of stores that can go in that place or the different type of stores, that's a different community conversation. You want to know what stores can go there? All the stores that you're currently leaving the city to spend your money on could go there. Parking, this is where it gets interesting. Right now, there are 2,500 surface lot parkings at the Boulevard site. Right now, there are 4,000 spaces in garages already in the Shaco area, most of the state garages. The use of those right now is almost all exclusively during the day, and at the night, they're almost all vacant. We can double use those in a way that then allows us to use them for baseball, for other tourist activities, and in the day they can still get utilized for the office workers. And that's a better use of all of our public money. Because the state money, let's be blunt, that's also our tax dollars, just not our local tax dollars, but our state tax dollars, so we should want that utilized well also. Traffic, both places. On the Boulevard right now, the Boulevard site is 0.4 miles from I-95. Right now, we'll show a slide on this. The Shaco site is a half a block from 95. So both of them are convenient sites. And then this is where we talk about the net new tax revenue. Under the plan, the tax revenue, if we were to leave baseball on the Boulevard, still use some of that site to build some other stuff, some mall or whatever, the estimates right now are about $91 million over 20 years. Under the plan that we're proposing over 20 years, the estimate of tax revenue would be $187 million, a 2-for-1 return on the difference in the comparison of the plans. Now we're talking about the financial analysis again. On the Boulevard plan, up to $6 million a year in new revenue, if you just did the Boulevard. But if it's Shaco, you're talking about $12 million. One of the things we forget sometimes in government, because we throw these numbers around, like as if I have $12 million or $6 million. Right now, as we start the budget process in the city of Richmond, and we're talking about all the things that we want, all the things that we need, and we're having the same argument that we have every year. As we start this discussion for a budget that's due in May, as we sit here today, we are $20 million from what we have to what we need. $20 million. So when we have these discussions about can't we do more for schools, When we have these discussions about right now as we sit here, we have, I heard this morning, I thought the number was 40, I heard the number is actually 60 vacant police officer slots. When we have this discussion about the vacant firefighters, when we have this discussions about what choices are we making, one of the simple answers is we need to bring more money in, period. When we have the discussion about we are paying as property owners $1.20 per thousand on our real estate tax, and in Henrico and Chesterfield, they're paying under $1 on theirs. We need to bring more money in. There's only so many rabbits that you can pull out of the hat for so long. By opening up the 2 locations to full development, the Shockoe option generates twice as much new tax revenue. Twice as much. Okay? Did you get that? Next slide. All right. The greatest net financial benefit comes from placing the ballpark in Shockoe. Shockoe option opens up the opportunity for the city to realize the full benefit of building out the 60-plus acre boulevard site. It's just like a good football play. I've got to move something out of the way so I can move something into it, and the parts have got to move, but it has to be synchronized. Shockoe development makes the land productive. We are taking land that right now is in a floodplain and will not be developed unless money is put into it, and we're putting the money into it, and this is what we're doing, and if I must say so myself, it's an incredibly smart move. When you talk about a hotel can be in a whole bunch of different places. A lot of times hotels need to be near things, or something that's going to make it special, so you want to be at that hotel versus another. Literally, one of the things that's exciting about the hotel is a hotel overlooking a baseball diamond is an attractive thing. An apartment for the developers near a baseball diamond is an attractive thing. It makes their product more attractive because they know who they're selling it to and who's willing to pay money for it. And it also makes money, so then we get the money back. If they're making money, we make money. That's business. The Shockoe development makes it possible to develop the heritage site. One of the things about the heritage site which we talked about, we are talking about between a $20 and $30 million investment for the first phase. These discussions about the slave trail and these other discussions have been going on for about a decade. This money is not easy to come by. To find a business solution that then directs money towards a project for a heritage and an educational site, we are trying to make a learning experience good business. Private development associated with Shockoe Park will generate the funds needed to pay for the ballpark itself. That's what I indicated before. That literally, the buildings surrounding it that are coming out of the ground, the increased tax revenue that will come off of those buildings, and it will be guaranteed as part of the business deal that this is the amount of tax revenues that the owners agree to pay, will pay for the ballpark and the improvements. Then, let's get to also where the rubber meets the road when you have 26% poverty. The Shockoe development creates 400 permanent and 1,000 temporary jobs in a city where our unemployment rate, I believe, right now is 8.2%. Next slide. As you said before, it's the current view of Shockoe. Again. And this is what we're talking about. And let's talk about the heritage site a little bit. All right, this is sort of an overlay of the area. We talked before. There's the ballpark where the one is. There's the buildings around it. There's the building north of Boulevard. The building north of Boulevard, Broad, that's the building that the Kroger would go in. This Kroger, and we've got the one grocery store down on Main Street, as far as of size. I don't know if that's Farm Fresh or the Market right now. I don't remember which it is. And I don't know the size of that. This store that's being proposed is a 65,000 square foot Kroger. This is a full service store. And if I can, we're also talking about, which is different than anything we've talked about in the city in a while. We're also talking about creating jobs that all, number one, are accessible as far as being able to reach with transportation. And number two, are jobs that folks in the community can get. We create a good number of jobs in the city. Many of them have been very high-tech jobs that everybody can't qualify for. We're talking about also creating jobs that go through the spectrum. In a grocery store, you're talking about a job from everything that a teenager needs to a management job and everything in between. We're talking about in this building also would be a 120-bed Hyatt hotel. And we're also talking about the parking, which goes up the street, and then you see a slide, to accommodate those things and the apartments that go in there. Okay? One of the things about this area that many don't know is right now the city of Richmond, when we did the census in 2010, census is done every 10 years. In 2010, the census for the city of Richmond had our population at 204,000 people. That was 2010. The estimate of our population right now is 210,000 people. The city of Richmond is actually growing faster than the surrounding counties. This area down here, this is one of the fastest growing areas in the region. This area down here, because of MCV or VCU health systems, we're supposed to call it now, because of these areas and other things, the demographics have changed. A lot of young professionals coming in there. My understanding right now, and the developers can tell you more, is the vacancy rate down here, their occupancy rate, let me do the opposite, the positive as opposed to rate. The occupancy rate down here is above 90% for one of the premium areas in the region. This is a hot area that people with the money want to live in. You have to take advantage of that and grow it and get the people in your city that can then generate the money which generates the jobs. That's just down here. When we talk about then taking this vision up to the boulevard and then opening that fully up for the economic development that can happen, and you're talking about malls, and you're talking about shops, and you're talking about stores, you're talking about entrepreneurial opportunity, you're talking about jobs, you're talking about investments, now you're talking about economic engines that run. And the big difference, and I'm probably talking to the over 40s right now, and remember it well. For the last 20 years, our dialogue in this city has been very simple. Can we please get some buses to go up Broad Street and down Hull Street to take folks from the city out to the counties where the jobs are? For the first time, we're offering something different. Can we please grow our own jobs in our own city where people can already reach? And that's a very different conversation. Next slide, please. Again, this is a conceptual view sort of from Gray Street. And one of the things that we want to make sure we capture, because this is a matter of pride, is the city of Richmond skyline is one of the prettiest skylines, and we want to make sure that everything we're doing, we're capturing it. This is a matter of pride. This is our home. We've got something to celebrate, and we're going to have to start walking that walk. Next slide. Conceptual view from Broad Street. As you saw before, the concourse, that's street level. Everything else is down. Next slide. This is when we talked about the promenade with the farmer's market right now. All right. This, is the concept of creating destinations. So you want to allow this. This is the concept of creating destinations, where people want to go, where people want to set up shop, where people want to be. What your imagination can then do is, what does this look like year round? What does this look like at the holiday season? What does this look like in the summertime? What does this look like there? Is this the place to be? Next. These are some of the maps identifying historic sites. Needless to say, there is a lot of discussion about where some of the sites are, as there will be. We found out recently that one of the maps that we had been using that we got from the Slave Trail Commission was a map that the lady who did it said that she really hadn't authorized anyone to use it. We stopped. Because one of the things we do not want is any discord with this. This is an important thing. We want to be able to move forward. We will not always agree, but we definitely want to make sure we're respecting the views of everybody involved in the process. Now let's talk about what we can do with this heritage site. This is an artist's conception, and we've got Burke Pennock here, the architect that drew these, in the audience today. He did an incredible job. He's been studying this. And Burke, you've been working on this for what now, 10 years? 10 years, all right? We didn't just start thinking about this stuff. This is what we're talking about. This is, interesting enough, the Lumpkins jail site. This is actually where we found the foundation for the Lumpkins jail. The concept is to have a glass pavilion where individuals can see, they can study. If you all remember where the burial grounds are that we just got back from VCU a couple years ago, that also is being considered and discussed, and whether or not that's a place where you might want a garden or contemplation or meditation garden, something that's going to be first class, something that's going to want the people to come to Richmond. We want them to get off of that highway. We want them to come. We want them to learn something. We want them to leave their money behind. And then we want them to move on. Next slide. This, interesting enough, is a rendering. This, you wouldn't even look at it and think this is actually the train station with what the designs and what we're building that out. And I believe that project, Byron, is how much?
Currently about $29
About
million.
$29 million. As you can see, one of the things that's going to be different about it is, see the sides? The sides are going to be translucent. The light's going to go through them. So literally, at night, it's going to almost look like a beacon. And it's just totally different effect. Next slide. This is going to be a conceptual rendering of Franklin Street as it's opened up and it's passing through. And then you can go through Franklin Street over to the historical sites and where Lumpkin and those are. So it's opening that area up for access. Next. These are some fountains and other type of European designs for different places and plazas and things such as that. Next. Right now, and again, one of the differences in this, as opposed to an idea, this is an actual plan. We have commitments from the grocery store right now to build a 65,000 square foot store. We have commitment from the Hyatt right now to build a 120-bed hotel. We have commitment from the developers right now. No disrespect to some of the other ideas. Ideas are wonderful, but at the end of the day, you got to have a piece of paper with somebody's name on it that's going to spend the money before it's due. This is the parking deck right there on Franklin. If you're coming down 95, you get off on Franklin Street, bam, that's where the parking deck is. Next. If you're coming up 95, I'm sorry, it's coming from the south, that was coming from north. If you're coming up 95 from the south, past the clock tower, get off on Broad Street, that's where the end of the building would be, on Building B on Broad, and that's also the parking access. So when you have concerns about traffic, you have concerns about access, that's what it's going to look like. And as I said before, 7,000 people go to every VCU game, and it's a lot further off the highway than this. Now let's talk about some of the things, or just ideas, that we could do with the boulevard. When you say 60 acres, what's that mean? It's a big plot of land that's someplace. And as a matter of fact, the city probably only has one other. In the 62 square miles of our city, we probably only have one other developable piece of land of this size. And that's probably over on South Side, over by the Target. There's a bunch of acres back there in the woods somewhere. That might be as large. But other than that, this, and we're fortunate that it happens to be well located. Because I don't know about anybody else, I didn't know anything about it, but the one rule in real estate, they say, location, location, location. So you got a big piece of land nobody can reach, that's nice. You got a big piece of land right off of I-95 and I-64, that's real nice. Concepts from other cities, you can have urban designs for whether it's Walmart, Best Buy, Target, Whole Foods. These are the conversations that we need to have. What is it that we want it to look like? Because in the end of the day, if we're not going to spend our money, it's not going to be successful, so there's no need in building it. So of course you're going to have a community conversation because this needs to be successful. lovingrva.com. I'm still old school, so I probably need paper. That's where we're getting more information on it. Interestingly enough, one of the discussions, and it's a fair discussion, is about, and there's no right answer. There's different points of view, and we have to respect them. And one of the things that we get to do some of these conversations is sometimes you get to ask, well, have other places had this experience? And if so, how did they handle it? Sometimes they handled it in the way that you learn from for good, sometimes for bad. I just learned this weekend, interestingly enough, when we talk about the appropriateness of something as, with the history of slavery, being nearby, something as festive as baseball. And that's a fair question. One of the things, and there's no wrong or right answer, so we respect each other's views on it, and and that's what we have to commit to do. One of the things that got presented to me this weekend, and I would invite you all, to take a look at it also, is apparently in Cincinnati, Ohio, they had the National Center for, and I can look on I don't want to get the name wrong, I can look on my phone now and get it, for the Underground Railroad, the Underground Railroad, National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. And the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center is a $110 million museum that they built to commemorate the Underground Railroad, the role that Cincinnati, right there on the river, played, and all that. And interestingly enough, and it was opened in 2004, it's not new. So they had a 10-year fundraising thing, they opened it up, and literally Oprah Winfrey and everybody else was there, Muhammad Ali was there for the opening, and it's located right on the river, and interestingly enough, and you can look on the internet, it's right there, and interestingly enough, it's located right between their two stadiums. And one of the reasonings was you wanted it in a central place that people would come to because you wanted them to have another reason to be there because you wanted them to learn this stuff. And you wanted to make it convenient for them to learn it. We have a lot of very important discussions that we have to have. At the end of the day, one of the things we have to focus on is what are our objectives, what are the best ways to get there, and to make sure that we listen and are respectful for different points of view. Sort of like the rules that Tammy laid out. We're not pretending that we have all the answers. We are saying that we've worked very hard on a plan and think it meets the goals that we set out to meet and will help move the city forward. And we're moving forward towards that discussion and towards the decision of what we're going to do. So that's what I've got right now. I don't know if I'll turn over to Tammy for whatever the next part of this, but I want to thank you for your attention and any opportunity we have to answer questions. We're all going to be here. So.